Disclaimer. All I am is a paralegal, forensic investigator, and analyst. I do not know it all. No human does. This is my research and findings in my investigation of a horrid event. If you don't like what I've found, join the club. I don't like it either. If you don't believe what I've found, conduct your own investigation. If you owe any lawfully created government agency any lawful, properly assessed tax, my recommendation is for you to pay it. This country needs for all of us to watch much less TV and study how to bring it back to God through the person of Jesus Christ.
Okay, this video is 7 of 8. What do you hope all this will accomplish? These are the major goals. Number 1 is vindication of Kent Hovind. Number 2, new funds raised for expansion. Number 3, new contacts made for support. Number 4, new dinosaur adventureland built. Parallel to this is number 5, Judge Rogers removed from office. Number 6, the remaining prosecutor removed from office. Number 7, the reversal of all 58 criminal convictions. And number 8, compensation for Kent's damages. Okay, so number 1, vindication of Kent Hovind. The first goal is vindication. We want Kent Hovind to have his reputation and his standing in the United States of America and the world returned to him, whether or not we can ever get the fraudulent false felony convictions off of his shoulders. I believe that by exposing the fraud that was committed against the Hovinds is the best way to do that, and I believe I have succeeded in vindicating them in this video series. Many people down deep in their hearts felt, hoped, and believed that the Hovinds did not commit the crimes they were accused of. With this video series, now they can know it. Ever since Kent got a copy of his indictment to me, it was about 15, 16 months ago, I began analyzing the case and finding that the Hovinds committed no crimes. Now, Jo Hovind has not asked me to do anything for her. I have not sought out her approval or permission to do my research. My work to vindicate Kent also vindicates Jo. However, Jo has now divorced Kent, and technically speaking, the habeas corpus or writ of ericorum nobis, once it gets prepared and filed, could affect her federal felony convictions as well. But theoretically, Jo Hovind could insist on bifurcation and request that the habeas corpus or writ of error only affect Kent's convictions, and that would leave her illicit conviction to stand as it is. I don't know why Jo would want this if she does, but I wanted to clarify to the public that I'm not seeking anything from or working for Jo. I'm only trying to assist Kent to the degree and ability that God has called me to do. Funds raised. The second goal is to raise funds. I want you to think about how we have been unable to support Kent Hovind and the ministry of Christian Science Evangelism over the last 10 years. Imagine if you and 20,000 or 30,000 or 40,000 just like you could have supported Kent and the CSC ministry for a very affordable $5 each year. There is one thing you may not have been aware of that you need to know. In the last 10 plus years, Kent has not been receiving the donations that were sent to the older addresses because those were taken over by his son Eric when Kent was arrested. To date, Eric has refused to hand over that massive accumulated email and customer contact list back to Kent. And none of the funds that have been mailed there since Kent's imprisonment have been forwarded to Kent either during or since he got out of prison in July of 2015. Now, if you've been sending funds during Kent's prison time, they've been going to Eric and not used for Kent or Creation Science Evangelism, despite what you may have been told or read or what you've been thinking. Since Eric has recently served Kent with an eviction notice from the original Creation Science Evangelism property in Pensacola, Florida, it has been and continues to be off limits to supporters of Kent. No on-site ministry in Florida has been occurring since 2006, and so the most recent donations given to the new ministry have been used to acquire land and build a totally new CSE ministry site in Repton, Alabama. 10 years, $5 each. And while we know that you're most likely a hardworking family member having to do your best to make ends meet on what you earn, I'm asking that you imagine spending nearly 10 years in prison, bearing up under such fraudulent charges, and try to imagine the loss of your liberty, the loss of time that can never be bought back, and the loss of ministry momentum from 2006 to 2015, and all of the ministry assets. If you could commit to $5 for each of those lost 10 years, it would be $50. And that would be a massive blessing to Kent and the relaunch of CSE to its former impact. So please pray now for the Lord to give you the ability to raise that $50 or more to make up for the lost time and lost momentum. This ministry could have and would have continued growing, reaching tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands more people with the gospel, had it not been so egregiously interfered with and interrupted by having Kent sent off to prison on blatantly false charges and the ministry assets seized and sold off. We want to boost CSE back to where it could have been had it never been stopped by fraud. The best way to do that is with donations. Orders for material are good also, but your donation will greatly assist in securing new facilities and will also help the legal team as we work to prepare and file the proper court documents to reverse these fraudulent convictions, and then work in preparing the follow-up court documents to get Kent the compensation he is due for the damages to him caused by the prosecutorial and judicial fraud. I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you to send for this information because I'm asking you to help us reverse the charges. That can be done if you will help by participating in the plan. Please make your check or money order payable to Creation Science Evangelism and send it to Creation Science Evangelism, care of Ernie Land, 1798 Melson Lane, Studio C, Westfield, Florida, 32464. Be sure that's Melson with an M, not an N. This is also repeated in video 8. And also, one more thing, this is very important. To make sure that Kent knows that these funds are launching the new location and the legal work for him, please designate whatever check or money order you send by ordering the Innocence package so you can have the detailed instructions on how to help. As a way to keep Kent Hovind and Creation Science Evangelism on your daily prayer list, I've asked Kent to prepare to order at least 20,000 refrigerator magnets with his goal and message on it. One will be sent to everyone who sends in that $50 donation, which will remind you daily to pray for Kent and the ministry as a thank you for jump-starting the new facilities. So we don't have the 20,000 ordered yet. I think we're going to order them in 1,000 lot bundles if we can get enough orders coming in for the Innocence package. Now, I thought of this refrigerator magnet as a visual point of contact to send back to contributors, so I designed a layout and Kent approved it. Please be sure to use a clearly legible return address so that CSE can be sure to get you your hand-numbered prayer partner refrigerator magnet back to you. This is my idea, not Kent's idea. You will know that you are a part of a much larger body of believers who love Kent and the CSE ministry and are supporting the common goal of bringing souls into the kingdom. If you cannot donate $50, please donate what you can as close to this $50 as possible. One option you may have is to see if you can turn this effort into a family ministry project by eliciting your children's help if they are still at home, or by having a garage sale. Bigger kids can be earners and do some chores for neighbors for extra pay, or hold a bake sale and set up a lemonade stand. If you participate, lead, and supervise, they can learn about helping fellow Christians in growing ministries. This will teach them how it can be a fun blessing to participate in a larger theme, subject, or charitable effort than themselves, all the while helping boost an awesome ministry that brings in souls to the kingdom. For those who cannot afford the full $50 themselves, see if you can raise the full $50 or more out of your congregation. Then the refrigerator magnet could possibly go on the church fridge or bulletin board for all to see and be reminded to regularly pray for the ministry. One option you may have is to ask your pastor to replace the next available Wednesday night meeting, or even to schedule an extra night like Friday or Saturday night as a Kent Hovind video 1 through 8 vindication night, and ask for a collected donation then and send it in. If all 20,000 of you or more do this in the first 30 days after we get these videos launched, Kent would quickly have a major portion of the funds to build CSE in Alabama. Now, this would include new rides, new acquired fossils for the museum displays and exhibits, building and acquiring learning tools, building the facilities, and ordering the educational materials bigger and better than ever before. Plans are being made for a full-sized ark and the world's largest dinosaur building. The new site can also take donations by phone at 855-BIG-DINO. That's 855-244-3644. The secondary fundraiser for the Ark will include an unofficial ceremonial title of plank owner to those who donate $100 per plank. Those who desire to have their name engraved on a visible plank can request it. The router engraving will be stained darker before sealing for readability. The ministry reserves the right to refuse this privilege to antagonists and organizations that do not truly promote Christianity, and to remove or replace any plank discovered later to not be desirable. Your plank owner certificate bearing your name or the name of your church or organization will be returned after receipt of the donation. Number 3, spread the word. The third goal is to spread the word. Please spread and forward this entire video series out to as many fellow Christian believers, families, and churches as you possibly can to get the word out. For the last 10 years, many people have been believing the lies of the government about the Hovinds. When the Christians across America view these videos, they will then know that Kent and Joe did nothing illegal or even immoral with the donated funds for the ministry. Vindication is the goal. Bring Kent up in social media and conversations with fellow believers and get their email addresses if you don't already have them, and forward this series out to them, please. I'm asking you to forward this 8-video link, email, or DVD to at least 5 or more of your closest friends so they too can join in on this project. And what if we could get 100,000 people donating $50 each to build the new facilities? That would be fantastic. To see the Ark and Dinosaur building built in under 2 or 3 years, I think it would be. Number 4, building of the new Dinosaur Adventureland in Repton, Alabama. Fourth goal is building Dinosaur Adventureland, the new Creation Science Evangelism Dinosaur Adventureland theme park and spiritual renewal center is being built right now at 488 Pearl Lane, Repton, Alabama. Google it up and take a look at it. Pearl Lane is closer to Lenox, Alabama than Repton, but Lenox shut down its post office, and that's why the physical address and the education and inspirational material ordering address is listed as Repton. It is nestled among surrounding forests with trails and ponds around a massive former gravel pit that will be home to a future Noah's Ark and the world's largest dinosaur building. It will house an education and ministry center. There's lots of work to be done, so if you have some free time and special skills for construction, call ahead and come on down. The Ark alone will probably cost around $2 million to build and install displays inside. The world's largest dinosaur building will likely run close to another $1 million. Both projects can be accomplished in just a couple of years if everybody gets involved in supporting the ministry. Number 5, and this is the most critical point. Removal of Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers from the bench. The 5th goal is to have Judge Rogers removed from the federal bench. This must be done for Kent to receive the true justice that we all want for him. Please allow me to explain how and why. The final goal is to have Kent compensated for his great loss of everything and the harm done because of these false charges. But we cannot file suit and secure that until we get all 58 criminal convictions overturned because of a Supreme Court ruling that created what's called the Heck Doctrine. And we cannot get these 58 felony convictions overturned until we prepare and file a habeas corpus or a writ of error quorum nobis. But we cannot file either of those back into the very same court where Margaret Catherine Rogers still sits. Why is that? We absolutely know that there is no way that she is going to overturn her own case, because to do that, she would be admitting that she allowed prosecutorial fraud to be entered and used against the Hovinds 10 years ago with her knowing, willing involvement, proving that she joined in with their fraud. That is just not going to happen, folks. So we have to get her removed from office before filing the habeas or writ of error quorum nobis. Once we do that, the new judge, whoever they are, will be much more inclined to give the habeas corpus or writ of error the true justice the Hovinds or Kent by himself deserve. That removal can be done, and I will show you how. I want at least 20,000, but more if you want to join in. But I want at least 20,000 official complaints filed against Margaret Catherine Rogers within 5 days of you watching these videos. Congress wrote very specific instructions on how to do just that. Now, I'm aware of 2 federal judges about 20 years ago who were relieved of their office with only a few hundred official complaints being received on them. In the history of America, at least 20 federal judges have flat out resigned with enough proper complaints having been received against them. Your written complaint against Margaret Catherine Rogers must be prepared a certain way and mailed in a specifically formatted envelope to one judicial address the law provides. However, there are 3 conditions that must exist in your mind and heart first for you to be able to file a complaint on this federal Judge Rogers to the 11th Circuit Court. The first element that must exist is this: you must believe that Judge Rogers knowingly allowed fraud to be entered by the prosecutors, and that by knowingly allowing it, she joined in with the fraud of the prosecutors to secure an illicit conviction by the jury. You don't have to know it, but you do have to believe that she did. Your complaint requires your honest belief. That is the same standard that prosecutors use in complaints to create indictments against defendants. You must ask yourself this question, and the answer will come to your mind instantly. Do you actually believe that Margaret Catherine Rogers is so unintelligent as to be unable to perceive the prosecution sneaking in of 58 counts of pure fraud without her detecting it? The second element that must exist is this. Did the convictions of the Hovinds, both then and especially now that you have watched these videos and become aware of the depth and scope of fraud that was used to secure an illegal conviction, did it shock your conscience? When you learned the news of the charges and convictions, did it disturb, alarm, horrify, bother, sicken, or scare you to a high degree that this Christian minister and his wife were being sent to prison over these clearly false, trumped-up charges, and the ministry assets were being forfeited? I cannot answer for you. Only you can answer for you. The third element that must exist is this. Did the actions of the IRS, the DOJ, and the judge, both then and especially now that you have learned the real full truth of what I have presented to you, cause you to lose faith in the federal court system? Again, I cannot answer for you. Only you can answer for yourself. Here's the way to tell or gauge if their fraud caused you to lose faith in the federal court system. Knowing what you know now, after viewing these videos, if you were innocent but charged with federal felonies, how willing would you now be to trust that the federal court system is fair and impartial at the trial court level, where only the truly guilty are convicted and all of the innocent go free? Do you trust the federal court system because of the way that Margaret Catherine Rogers treated the Hovinds? A lot of these surveys, you'll see like at least 5 choices. No way, marginally, maybe, probably, or absolutely. So that's what I've put here. Do you trust the federal court system because of the way that Margaret Catherine Rogers treated the Hovinds? I know what I pick. I can't pick for you. If you absolutely trust the federal court system, then, maybe you ought not to be filing the complaint. But if you in no way trust the way that the federal court system because of the way Margaret Rogers treated the Hovinds, then I'm picking no way. I don't trust the system. Now, put it another way, now that you have watched at least these videos, 1 through 6 and 7 down to here, if you were standing before Margaret Catherine Rogers right now with a 10-year federal prison sentence hanging over your head, do you believe she would give you proper due process? Think about that for a minute. Only you can answer the way you know. If you do not believe you would get due process by her, and you believe she joined the prosecutor's fraud in the Hovind case, and your conscience was shocked, and this all caused you to lose faith in the federal court system, and you are at least 18 years of age, and you have no felony conviction yourself, then you qualify to be able to file a complaint. So please do it. Under those circumstances, if all of these 6 things apply, please follow through with a complaint. You may be thinking, well, what good would complaining do? I thought federal judges are appointed for life. Well, that is not completely accurate. I suspect that Margaret Catherine Rogers hopes you never learn about the 3 words below. Here's the real truth. Federal judges are appointed for life on good behavior. If at any time they begin to give us, the people, bad behavior, their term of office can be and should be terminated. So now, here's my question to you. Would you consider what Judge Margaret Rogers did to Kent and Joe Hovind to be good behavior? If not, then by her bad behavior, she has disqualified herself, but nonetheless, she will stay right where she is if no one complains properly to the proper officials with their sworn affidavit, having a shocked conscience, lost faith in the federal court system, and criminal complaint in the specific documents format already prescribed by Congress. Did Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow counts 1 through 12 of a statute that had no enforcement regulations to be fraudulently charged and prosecuted against Kent Hovind when there was no lawful requirement for any First Amendment protected minister to file an SS4, a 2678, a 1023, and quarterly 941s to begin with? If she did, that's bad behavior. Did Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow 45 fraudulent counts of statutes to be prosecuted against the Hovinds that had regulations that exempted them from criminality by them having an account and operating normal banking activities for 11 plus years, and yet allow the prosecution to withhold this vital exculpatory evidence? If she did, That is bad behavior. Did Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow 45 fraudulent counts of statutes to be prosecuted against the Hovinds when at least 5 prior federal court rulings had already declared that bank customers making any number of transactions under $10,000 to be no crime at all? If she did, that is bad behavior. Did Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow 45 fraudulent counts of statutes to be prosecuted against the Hovinds when no ministries of any kind are listed in the banking regulation lists that exclude and prevent a long list of financial and business industries from being exempt, and that by the fact that no ministry is in those excluded industries, the Hovinds were already immune? If she did, that is bad behavior. Did Judge Margaret Rogers allow the prosecution of the 45 counts of structuring against the Hovinds when there is no requirement to file the Form 4789 in the first place because the IRS failed to publish the form according to the Administrative Procedures Act, making structuring an impossibility? If she did, that is bad behavior. Did Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow 45 fraudulent counts of statutes to be prosecuted against the Hovinds when no ministries of any kind are listed in the banking regulation lists that exclude and prevent a long list of financial and business industries from being exempt, and that by the fact that no ministry is in those excluded industries, the Hovinds were already immune? If she did, that is bad behavior. Did Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow one fraudulent count of a statute that had only 5 regulations, which were exclusively for importing, exporting, and manufacturing tobacco-related products and cigarette papers and tubes, to be improperly used against Kent when they never owned any tobacco factory or business? If she did, that is bad behavior. Did Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow all of the property of Creation Science Evangelism to be forfeited and seized under the drug laws when the 45 counts of structuring were totally fraudulent to begin with, according to numerous case laws and 31 U.S.C. 5313 D and E, and when all or almost all of the property had already been bought prior to the accused dates, making it totally exempt from seizure per 21 U.S.C. 853 D? If she did, that is bad behavior. Did Margaret Catherine Rogers knowingly allow numerous deprivations of due process to occur against the Hovinds at the hands of IRS revenue agents of Puerto Rico, 27 CFR 26.11, and from the prosecutors who wrote the indictment and who left out the whole truth that would have revealed no crimes were ever committed in the first place? If she did, that is bad behavior. Every federal judge is required to know every element of every case that lands on their elevated desk. No federal judge can claim ignorance of the law. Ignorance of the law does not excuse anyone, least of all in a sworn officer of the law. Henry McCowan. Margaret Rogers certainly cannot claim to have not read the very documents that were placed in her hands by some well-trained prosecutors as some empty defense to an accusation of fraud. If you believe Judge Rogers' actions were bad behavior, then you have an American duty to notify the proper authorities that you will not tolerate this kind of behavior from our public servants in the federal court system. President Abraham Lincoln once said, quote, "We, the people, are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men and women who pervert the Constitution." End quote. Bad behavior of a judge can include things like drunkenness and drug addiction. And most people would agree and understand that even the federal court system has to have the ability to remove a judge for those kinds of behavior. But bad behavior can also include allowing the prosecutors to deprive the defendants of due process by entering fraud into court to secure an illicit and illegal conviction, which strips the court of all subject matter jurisdiction, yet proceeding anyway. This system is set up to automatically trust and believe that if there are no complaints coming in, then you people must be happy with the way things are, because Congress did create and enact the judicial complaint procedures, and they would not have done so had they not expected the people at some time to let them know if there was a serious problem out here. Therefore, they equate your silence with your contentment when it comes to judges. The Judicial Conduct and Disabilities Act of 1980 authorizes the 13 circuit courts to accept the complaints of the people against judges in their circuit. The written complaints against Margaret Catherine Rogers must be sent to the 11th Circuit, which is over the Northern District of Florida at Pensacola. Warning: do not, under any circumstance, contact or even attempt to contact Margaret Catherine Rogers. No letters, no emails, no phone calls, nothing. There are several federal statutes that they could use to attack you with if you were to do so, and claim that you were attempting to intimidate her. We do have every right, however, to file our redress with all available officers. One of them states, 18 U.S.C. 372, if two or more persons in any state, territory, possession, or district conspire to prevent by force, intimidation, or threat any person from accepting or holding any office, trust, or place of confidence under the United States, or from discharging any duties thereof, or to induce by like means any officer of the United States to leave the place where his duties as an officer are required to be performed, or to injure him in his person or property, or on account of his lawful discharge. There's a qualifier there. On account of his lawful discharge of his the duties of his office, or while engaged in the lawful discharge thereof, or to injure his property so as to molest and interrupt, hinder, or impede him in the discharge of his official duties, then it's a crime. So they have 18 U.S.C. 372 in their corner. Do not contact Judge Rogers directly. Another one states, 18 U.S.C. 372A, whoever with intent that another person engage in conduct constituting a felony that has an element of the attempted use, or threatened use of physical force against property or against the person of another in violation of the laws of the United States, and under circumstances strongly corroborative of that intent, solicits, commands, induces, or otherwise endeavors to persuade such other person to engage in such conduct, shall be imprisoned not more than 1/2 of the maximum term. So this 18 U.S.C. 372 and 373A basically means do not contact the judge directly or indirectly, and also do not ask anybody else to contact the judge in your behalf. Just don't do it. You also need to know that Margaret Rogers is barred from retaliating against us for complaining against her. Judicial Conference Rule 3H1G prohibits her from retaliating against complainants, and 18 U.S. Code Section 1513, retaliating against a witness, victim, or an informant makes it a federal felony to do so. So none of us are allowed to directly contact her, and she is not to be contacting us. But I do ask that you, if you meet all of the qualifications, that you complain against her to the proper authorities. Some of the lesser acts that can be taken against judges include suspension, private censuring, private censuring, public censuring, private reprimand, public reprimand, and certification of impairment. But if enough people complain of incompetence, neglect of duty, or misconduct, and this is the one that we're going after, they request for them to resign or retire. And this is what we want. There are very specific demands on, 1, the form and contents of the complaint, and number 2, the external envelope. Please follow my instructions carefully, otherwise they will dispose of your complaint for cause. Now, the instructions I've written are only a repeat of the very complex, multiple pages of regulations that they have written about the rules to file a complaint. When the clerk of the 11th Circuit opens your envelope, you can expect to receive a letter back stating that they acknowledge receiving your complaint on a certain date. Margaret Catherine Rogers will be given due process by the 11th Circuit, and she will be allowed to compel witnesses against her if she were to choose to exercise that right. If you complain against her upon your belief of her fraud against the Hovinds, you had better truly believe it and be ready to back it up with your testimony in case the court were to subpoena you. If the chief of the circuit court conveniently avoids accessing these 8 videos to actually see what is being accused, that would be the time for you to bring printed copies and DVD copies for entry into the judge's inquiry of your allegation. If for some reason the clerk of the 11th Circuit believes your complaint does not fit within the rules, they are allowed to send it back to you, but they must explain why to give you time, notice, and opportunity to correct your filing for resubmission. So follow my instructions exactly, and we will all get to see what the American people's true grassroots political activism will accomplish. An interesting aspect of this process against her is this. The 11th Circuit Chief Judge will be required to send a copy of every complaint to Judge Margaret Rogers, but she apparently will not have to make any statement according to the rules of judicial complaints. These complaints may be what works, but what if it doesn't? Their rules allow them to accept only a certain number of orchestrated complaints. They did not disclose in the rules how many complaints constitutes many, but it seems they have written a self-serving rule that benefits them. But don't let that stop you from filing your complaint, because they have to mail you back a copy of the order that will have to be created in response when they figure out that your complaint is one of an orchestrated complaint. You may be wondering, how would that matter then? Even though they may start rejecting the orchestrated complaints beyond their magic number, maybe somewhere between 20 and 100 or more, they are still required to mail you a letter containing the generic photocopied order explaining why they are rejecting your complaint. Well, if they receive 20,000 complaints and they want to reject them all, they're going to have to send out 20,000 copies of that generic photocopied order in the mail, and then the clerks will have to deal with receiving 20,000 petitions for review coming back in. Besides, you don't know and won't know which complaint is yours out of that 20,000 or 30,000 or 50,000. And so everybody needs to do this to force them to know how many people are fed up with Margaret Catherine Rogers. Now, what if the chief judge just admonishes her and lets her go at that, or just outright denies your claim along with every other claim that they receive? I anticipate that the chief judge might do so, and so I have prepared the follow-up petition for review letter for you in video 8. This petition for review process is available for us to ensure that Judge Rogers is removed from office. To everyone who gets a dismissal from the Chief of the 11th Circuit, please don't just settle for that. Kindly follow through and file a petition for review and attach a copy of your sworn affidavit against Judge Rogers with the Judicial Council at the same address as the 11th Circuit. Petition for review. When the 11th Circuit receives your petition for review, they will then have to form up a council of 5 judges, 2 of which will be district court judges, excluding Margaret Rogers. And this 5-judge council will have to examine your petition for review and your affidavit. If the Chief of the 11th Circuit denies 20,000 complaints, and if everyone follows through, then the Judicial Council will have to read and decide 20,000 petitions for review. If the Judicial Council does not have her leave, then we the people can still go one more step up in this judicial complaint system. That step is to file a letter with the Judicial Conference in Washington, D.C. This panel must consist of 7 judges. This is the last of the 3 steps in the judicial side to complain of Judge Rogers' actions against the Hovinds. Now this, however, does not stop the legislative side of the impeachment process. As I was digging into the federal judicial complaint system, I found that we the people also have the right to contact our House representative and respectfully demand that they immediately file articles of impeachment. There is no requirement for us to wait until or if the chief judge or either of the higher panels of judges initiates a recommendation for impeachment of Judge Rogers. Since there is no prohibition and thus no reason to wait, and since there is a likelihood that the judicial branch is going to be inclined to seeing what they can do to keep Judge Rogers in office, I have prepared those House and Senate letters for you as well in video 8. You may live in a state with many House representatives. However, I only want you to contact the one House member that represents your district located by your zip code with the letter I have provided, or you can write your own. The House representatives are the ones in Congress who write out the accusations and submit the articles to the Senate. The Senate's job is to adjudicate or administer the case to its completion. So I have also prepared your letters to your 2 senators in video 8 so that you can notify them that they should expect to receive articles of impeachment against Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers from your 1 district House representative, and that you're asking them to accept the articles and act on them. We want you and at least 20,000 other concerned Americans to contact each of your 3 congressional representatives by certified mail with the form letters we provide, or with your own handwritten or typed language in a written demand to have Margaret Catherine Rogers impeached for her fraud and deprivation of due process against the Hovinds. When you contact them, follow up with an email to their office linking these 8 videos so they can view all of this material to know why you're demanding her impeachment. The goal is to have all 535 members of Congress totally aware of the fact that we the people will not tolerate this kind of judicial behavior anymore. We're trying to make this as absolutely simple as possible so as to get the best response from all Kent CSC supporters. In the website, KentHovindinnocent.com, we have listed every congressional senator by state and every House represented by their district in every state. That is, if we can find the best, simple, full list, we're going to provide that for you. If we can't find it, you should be able to locate your U.S. senators and U.S. House representatives online at the zip code list is much too extensive to post. Therefore, you will only have to find your district House representative by zip code and enter their name in the letter to have them initiate the articles of impeachment. All addresses we provide will be to their Washington, D.C. offices. But we need to move quickly. Despite this conviction being 10 years old, time is still of the essence. The following research came from several informative websites, books, and papers, including but not limited to, quote, How to Remove a Federal Judge, end quote. And that's found at 116 Yale Law Journal 72, published in 2006. There are 6 independent clauses where the United States Constitution speaks of impeachment. They are Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 and 7, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, Article 2, Section 4, Clause 1, Article 3, Section 1, Clause 1, and Article 3, Section 2, Clause 3. In the history of America, there have been 8 federal judges completely and successfully impeached over the decades between 1803 and 2010. 3 more judges resigned before the impeachment proceedings finished, for a total of at least 11 judges removed for things ranging from mental issues, drunkenness, improper business relationships with clients, and abuse of power, favoritism, practicing law from the bench, income tax evasion, perjury, conspiracy to solicit a bribe, sexual assault, obstruction, and accepting bribes. In 1996, 6 members of the state Supreme Court voted to overturn the Colorado election forbidding special rather than just equal rights for homosexuals. Following that flagrant display of contempt for the will of Colorado voters, there was a national call for the impeachment of those 6 justices. After this clamor for their removal, those same 6 justices suddenly became ardent defenders of the people's elections, and in a subsequent decision, unexpectedly and unanimously chastised the lower court that had overturned a statewide election in Arizona. This is all from David Barton's website, Wall Builders, in an article on impeachment of federal judges. You can find that online. Impeachments are charged by or accused by the House of Representatives side of Congress. The impeachment proceedings are adjudicated or administered by the Senate side of Congress. The full Senate does not have to hear all of the evidence. The impeachment articles are voted on by a simple majority. Both federal judges Baer and Dalzell were impeached at different times for one improper ruling in each of their courts. I want you to think about this. 2 separate federal judges were impeached successfully at different times for one improper ruling in each of their courts. So even if Judge Rogers has had no other complaints against her in her entire career, she can still be impeached properly for her deprivation of due process in the Hovind case. One federal judge was impeached on charges over 6 years old. The damages caused to Kent are still fresh, as he is still presently under parole. They call it probation now, but it's really just parole for 2 more years. They're not time barred. Federal Judge Samuel B. Kent was impeached in 2009, just 7 years ago, and so he resigned. When judges resign, they lose their lifetime of yearly pay of $169,300. Think about that. The Senate has twice convicted judges on articles of impeachment that did not even charge any indictable crimes. That was Judge Archibald and Judge Ritter. Archibald was in 1913 and Judge Ritter in 1936. They didn't even commit a crime, and yet they were still impeached. Judge James Peck was the first federal judge to be impeached by a citizen petition, so Margaret Catherine Rogers won't be the first in that regard either. Even if the Judicial Committee on the judicial complaint side recommends against impeachment, and they potentially could for Judge Rogers, the House of Representatives has the right and the power to override the Judiciary Committee's recommendations. I thought that was an interesting nugget. So even if the entire judicial side, after all of what's done and all the letters mailed into them, if they still recommend against impeachment, the House of Representatives still has the right and the power to override the Judiciary Committee's recommendations. Impeachments are an ancient method of righting judicial tyranny. It goes all the way back to the year 1386 in England for the impeachment of the Earl of Suffolk. Deprivation of a federally protected right of due process as a crime worthy of impeachment in light of 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242. See if you don't agree with me. It goes like this. Please follow along. Number 1, the federal prosecutors entered fraud into court, evident by these videos and the indictment. Number 2, the judge knowingly joined in the fraud, evident by these videos and the law. Number 3, fraud deprived the Hovinds of their right of due process. American jurisprudence and corpus juris secundum on fraud. Now these two bodies of these volumes here, American jurisprudence and corpus juris secundum, they are like the encyclopedic volumes that list and catalog just hundreds, maybe thousands of different aspects of the law, and they're alphabetically categorized. Due process is a federally protected right. Fifth Amendment and U.S. v. Anzalone. The deprivation of due process is a federal crime, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242. A judge who commits federal felonies, that's 18 U.S.C. 242 alone or 241 with others, can be impeached. That's the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act of 1980, also the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 4. Judges can be impeached even if they do not commit crimes. That's the impeachment of Judge Archibald and Judge Ritter. Deprivation of due process also strips the court of subject matter jurisdiction. That's 5 U.S.C. 706. Lack of jurisdiction voids all acts of judges. That's Nestor versus Hershey. Where there is no jurisdiction, there is no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. That's Manning versus Ketchum. A judge who acts without jurisdiction commits treason. That's U.S. versus Will. Treason is an impeachable offense. That's U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 4. Another alternative is this. Enter into Google or another web search engine and type in, who are my federal representatives for zip code blank, and just enter in your zip code, and both the House and the Senate will come up. Enter zip code and you'll have their name and mailing address in seconds. Once you get those 3 names and addresses, that is the 2 senators and the 1 House representatives, enter them into the appropriate 3 blank form letters that we provide. It should be supported by an enclosed copy of your sworn affidavit that you sent to the 11th Circuit Chief Judge. The form letters that we provide are simple, firm, direct, and courteous. They are a respectful demand that the House representative from your zip code district offer an impeachment resolution or file articles of impeachment. Impeachment convictions are unreviewable by the judicial court system. In other words, if Congress impeaches Judge Rogers, she cannot appeal to any federal court, even the United States Supreme Court. The trend of impeachment is accelerating. Impeachments used to be quite rare, but the last one was just 6 years ago while Kent was still in prison. As recently as July 2016, United States District Judge Mark Fuller was arrested and accused of domestic violence, and he has already been suspended from the bench and has been asked for his resignation. That's from the judicial side, not the congressional impeachment side. This happens and is no big deal to replace a judge, as there are hundreds of qualified candidates to select from, and they just appoint a new one. Any House member can initiate impeachment proceedings, and any Senate member can initiate adjudication of impeachment proceedings. That is why I want at least 20,000 demand letters going to the House of Representatives and another 40,000 demand letters going to the Senate, so that the entire 535 members know of her fraud and deprivation of due process actions against the Hovinds. I want the full House to file articles of impeachment, and I want the full Senate to be ready to act. From the outside looking in, there truly is no way that we can know whether Judge Rogers is incompetent or corrupt. But in one impeachment, Judge Bayless was removed because his incompetence was viewed to be a danger to the public. So either way, impeachment can happen, and in this case, needs to happen. You can use the letters I provide, and we recommend that you do, or you can write your own. However, if you choose to write your own letters, you will need to remain respectful, make your demands, provide your reasons why you want Judge Rogers removed from the people's office, and let them know that you expect your House and Senate representatives to correspond with you about the issue. I've already done all that for you. Goal 6 is the removal of federal prosecutor Michelle M. Heldmeyer. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It looks as if I am. The 6th goal is to remove Michelle M. Heldmeyer out of office in the DOJ. Of the 3 federal prosecutors that committed this heinous fraud against the Hovinds 10 years ago, one of them, John David Roy Atchison, has already committed suicide. The next 2 panels is a news story about another federal prosecutor in another case in a different state that also committed suicide when he was caught withholding critical evidence and allowing false evidence to be presented to the court. Here is that report of another federal prosecutor suicide. Nicholas Marsh, a Justice Department prosecutor who was under investigation for his role in the botched prosecution of former U.S. Senator Ted Stevens, Republican, Alaska, has committed suicide. It is a sad end to a promising career for Marsh, who was removed by the Public Integrity Section after the investigation was commenced at Justice. That just means at the DOJ. The prosecution of Stevens unraveled when it was discovered that the prosecutors had withheld critical evidence and were accused of allowing false or misleading evidence to be presented to the court. This includes withholding an interview with key witness Bill Allen that contained exculpatory evidence. The Justice Department filed a motion to set aside the conviction and sentence of Stevens on April 1, 2009. The prosecutorial team was held in contempt by the court for their misconduct. So the court even caught this. Still under investigation are former Public Integrity Section Chief Williams Welch II, Brenda Morris, a former Section Chief Section Supervisor, Alaska-based Assistant U.S. Attorney James Goek, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and Joseph Bettini, and former Public Integrity Trial Attorney Edward Sullivan. So all of these people were involved in this entire scheme of withholding exculpatory evidence and entering in false testimony. Regardless of the merits of the investigation, this is a tragedy for the Marsh family and the Public Integrity Section. Now, the source for this is locatable right there. And so if you don't believe me and you want to go read it yourself, please feel free to do so. Prosecutors have been largely immune from all forms of liability, but that trend is beginning to reverse somewhat. There are a few state and federal prosecutors who are very marginally being held accountable for their crimes or torts, but federal prosecutors are civil officers under federal law, and as such, they are just as subject to impeachment as any other. Michelle's removal will not occur until there is sufficient public pressure for the DOJ to remove her. I will do what I can do to educate you on the procedure, but you must follow through with immediate action. Here is the end result after decades of prosecutors not being held responsible for their torts and crimes. This is what they are presently allowed, unfortunately, to be able to do. Prosecutors may violate civil rights in initiating prosecution and presenting case. United States Supreme Court in Imler versus Packmans. Prosecutor can suppress exculpatory evidence indicating a defendant is innocent. That's according to the Fifth Circuit of Appeals in Hensel versus Gerstein. These kind of things is what they are getting away with right now. This is the kind of things that happens when we allow it to happen. Prosecutors may knowingly file charges against innocent persons for a crime that never occurred. 10th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals in Norton versus Liddell. Prosecutors are immune from lawsuits for conspiring with judges to determine outcome of judicial proceedings. That's according to the 9th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals in Ashelman versus Pope. If this kind of behavior is not acceptable to you, then file your complaint on Michelle Heldmeyer to all of the appropriate offices. We've got to reverse this trend, folks. We've got to come together and reverse this. A prosecutor is held to a standard higher than that imposed on other attorneys because of the unique function he or she performs in representing the interests and in exercising the sovereign power of the state. The prosecutor represents sovereignty whose obligation to govern impartially is as compelling as its obligation to govern at all, and whose interest, therefore, in a criminal prosecution is not that it shall win a case, but that justice shall be done. That's Berger versus United States, a very famous case. This is the way it should be, folks. And the trend in the previous panel of these 4 cases that have been isolated and located and sent to me show that this is getting away from us. Prosecutors have a special obligation to promote justice as the ascertainment of truth. The duty of the district attorney is not merely that of an advocate. His duty is not to obtain convictions, but to fully and fairly present the evidence. That's People versus Cassin. So, did Michelle M. Heldmeyer give justice to the Hovinds? Did Michelle Heldmeyer fully present all the evidence? Did Michelle Heldmeyer fairly present all of the evidence? You know the answer to these three questions. Michelle M. Heldmeyer is still with the DOJ and maybe in Boulder, Colorado. We also want her removed from office for her withholding critical exculpatory evidence and allowing false evidence to be presented to the court in the Hovind trial. Michelle's impeachment will do more to teach the federal prosecutors across America not to do this kind of criminal behavior than any simple DOJ memo with a hand slap ever will. I want to show you in video number 8 how to, 1, file a complaint with the DOJ against this remaining federal prosecutor, Michelle Heldmeyer, and also to file a complaint for her impeachment with each of your 3 federal representatives, 1 in the House and 2 in the Senate. And this is noteworthy because if she is impeached, not only would she lose her job with the DOJ, but she won't even be able to remain a lawyer. She'll have to go out and find an honest job somewhere. Now, based on the latest data, Michelle Heldmeyer now works out of Boulder, Colorado, but she can be impeached by Congress if you'll follow my instructions. Prosecutors are almost immune from any crime or tort they commit because of the office they hold, but they can be removed from the people's office. This next is the United States Attorney Manual number 6 at section 4-270. Government officers, agents, and personnel operate legitimately from delegated powers in the chain of authority. See if you can find where the criminal division of the DOJ has any delegated power to prosecute the Hovinds for failure to withhold 1-12, structuring 13-57, or interference with Tobacco Tax Bureau officers and tobacco facilities, number 58. Here it is, 6-40.270, Criminal Division Responsibility. The Criminal Division of the Department of Justice is responsible for prosecuting persons who have committed the following tax-related offenses: liquor tax, narcotics, stamp tax, firearms, wagering, coin-operated gambling and amusement machines, malfeasance offenses that IRS personnel have committed, forcible rescue of seized property, corrupt or forcible interference with an officer or employee acting under the Internal Revenue laws but not Omnibus Clause, counterfeiting, mutilation, or removal or misuse of stamps. Would somebody kindly show me which one of these Kent and Joe were charged with? You can't really do it. 7th goal, we also really want the case against Kent completely overturned. Well, how can that be accomplished? Lawyers would like to prepare and file either a habeas corpus or a writ of ericorum nobis in federal court for Kent. But Judge Margaret Catherine Rogers is still on the bench there in Pensacola, Florida. And we need a limited amount of funds to be able to work on preparing those documents for court. If anyone out there is particularly drawn to that end of the Kent Hovind issues, and you feel led to give specifically for that portion of work, please so designate your donations accordingly. It would be greatly appreciated and wisely and prudently spent. And while it may not be the most palatable for Kent to have to bite into, it may be that the conviction reversal actions and the damage compensation tort actions could easily take the next year or 2 to work on, even if Judge Rogers were to voluntarily leave the bench under the demands of the citizenry within the next 60 days. But Goal 8 is compensation for Kent for the false arrest, the malicious prosecution, the deprivation of due process, the fraud, the false imprisonment, and anything else we can find. For this last goal, I have to work backwards to describe it. The last goal we want for Ken Hovind is for him to receive at least $10 million for the false arrest, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, all the denigration, public scorn, embarrassment, shame, and hardship of being without his wife for over 9 years, stuck in federal prison and deprivation of due process rights. That's $1 million per year per case law and $50,000 per year per federal statute. And that should be tripled to $30 million with the treble damages for fraud. But we cannot get that $10 to $30 million for Kent without a settlement or winning a lawsuit against the feds for their torts against him. That's goal number 8. And we cannot win that lawsuit until after he wins the criminal side first, according to the Heck Doctrine, as shown in Heck versus Humphreys. Let's see. We must win the criminal side first to open the door. Other case laws that block civil suit claims to move forward until and unless the criminal charges are first reversed are Fernandez versus Alexander and Powell versus Scanlon and Velez versus Hayes. And I'm not sure, but I believe those are based upon the Heck doctrine. And we cannot win the habeas corpus or writ of error quorum nobis based on the fraud I've discovered until and unless we get Margaret Catherine Rogers removed out of the people's office. Therefore, getting Margaret Rogers impeached has to become our first and main grassroots activism goal starting right now. So having all this put together in the right order, we must first have Margaret Rogers removed from the federal judge's seat in Pensacola, Florida. And we can do that together by each of you filing complaints against her according to the instructions written by Congress and by demanding impeachment proceedings against her with each of your 3 congressional representatives. Then with her gone, we can take a habeas corpus or writ of error with all of this evidence of fraud that I've found to the new judge, who will be much more inclined to reverse Judge Rogers' fraudulent conviction. Please bear in mind the judicial branch complaint is not the impeachment request. The judicial branch complaint is to bring the total dissatisfaction of the people of America to light regarding Judge Rogers' bad behavior. The impeachment demands must go to Congress, the legislative branch, to have her removed from office. Then, once we get the reversals to all of the federal felonies for both Kent and Joe, or for Kent alone, if Joe chooses to have herself bifurcated out of the relief action, then and only then we will be able to file suit to have Kent compensated for the egregious loss of life, the 9 years it cannot ever be regained, the loss of liberty, the loss of property, the loss of standing, the loss of reputation, the loss of ministry, and the loss of family relationships, and loss of a wife of 43 years. This chart may help you see what is needed. All these can start now and run parallel. The vindication, the funds raised, your complaint letter to the 11th Circuit Chief Judge, your complaint letter to the House Representative in your zip code, your complaint letter to the first state senator, and the complaint letter to your second senator. So the results of the vindication will be that folks spread the word about Kent's innocence and the ministry being rebuilt. The funds raised for the new site and its construction will one day, hopefully very soon, result in the full-size ark and the world's largest dinosaur building being built right here. The complaint letter, and that is to the 11th Circuit, and the complaint letter to the House Representative in your zip code, and your complaint letter to the Senate, and the first senator and the second senator, will result in Margaret Catherine Rogers getting removed from office, or she voluntarily leaves office because of the total dissatisfaction of the people for her bad behavior. This will result in the criminal charges being reversed with habeas corpus or writ of error, and that will then result in the civil action to secure Kent Hovind the minimum $10 million that were caused to him over the 10 years of unlawful prosecution and incarceration. And so the last panel we have this. After the judicial complaint and the impeachment demands are mailed out on the judge, if the Chief Judge of the 11th Circuit dismisses your complaint against Margaret Rogers, then please complete and mail out your petition for review to the 11th Circuit at the same address. And if that petition for review gets denied at this 11th Circuit, then please complete and mail out the last letter in this judicial process to the Judicial Committee in Washington, D.C. Also, at the same time, after you get your first set of letters out to the proper authorities for against Judge Margaret Rogers, then please file your complaint against Michelle Heldmeyer to the DOJ, file your complaint letter to the House Representative in your zip code against Michelle, and file your letter to your first senator against Michelle Heldmeyer, and then file your complaint letter to your second senator against Michelle Heldmeyer. And please now go to video 8 to begin the action. I've got everything laid out as thoroughly in very simple instructions as possible. Thank you so very much.